I will. I'm going to do that at the end. So we talked about getting that anchor in a good spot. So again, even pressure. Another thing we can do is we think about like a clock. As that rod gets past 12 o'clock, what happens is most people put the acceleration, or they put too much energy before they get to 12, and that sends the line too far upriver. You got to make sure that you've already crested 12 and then put a little bit of pressure down. And that'll pull your line up a little bit more, but it'll get your anchor in the right spot almost every time. So, you know, some guys might like that. They like that piled line. They can maybe use that to kind of load the rod, use that bunched up line. It's almost like a Skagit cast. You know, you pile the line up a little bit more rather than having, you know, the even pressure. You can see it gives me a nice clean line on the water to peel against. Whereas cresting vertical and then giving it a little bit of energy is going to pile up my fly line a little bit more. Crest vertical, a little bit of energy, it kind of piles it up here, but it still works well. It gets my anchor into the right spot. So whatever works for you, you know, you got to decide what works for you. So that's a double spey. Again, keeping the rod level, accelerating a little bit quicker than the current, stopping at 430, lift, cast. A lot of it, again, is basically the same, the principles I went over in the beginning that I really focused on. Controlling the hands, stopping at 430, flat stroke, don't stroke on an upward angle, don't drop the rod tip. Keep it flat and then get the rod up above it. Very critical. Again, if you watch my rod, anyone have a time? Is it 11:30 or 12:30? I'm past? Okay. So again, a good stroke is going to be lift, level, stop, up, and out. Again, it doesn't matter the cast. You got to lift. Got to lift. So again, I do my double spey. I finish my stroke flat, then I lift the rod, and I cast it out. So I did a spiral roll, I did my double spey. The other cast I can do from this side of the river is a snap tee off my opposite shoulder. So I'm just doing instead of going clockwise, on the snap tee on this side I went clockwise. Now I'm going counterclockwise as a righty. And for lefties it would be the opposite. And then I would just come around, form my D-loop, and cast it out. The one difference too between an aerialized anchor cast and a sustained anchor cast is, when I do an aerialized anchor cast, when that anchor hits the water, I gotta go forward. I already have a D-loop, I cannot hesitate. So if I do a switch cast or a spiral roll, let's do a spiral roll. When that anchor hits, I gotta go. I've already got a D-loop. Whereas with a snap tee or a double spey, I've got my anchor, my line's here. I can hesitate for a second. If I wait too long, my anchor's gonna go out of position, but I can wait. Come around. The key here, guys, too, is you gotta relax. If you're tense, the cast isn't gonna work. You gotta breathe once in a while. You know what I mean? Guys get, and they start holding their breath, and they tighten their muscles up. Just relax, breathe, think about something funny, you know, drink a beer, whatever works for you. You know, you gotta relax. Before I end here, I just want to just show shooting line a little bit, and how to control your line in your hands. So let's say I was going to shoot a fair amount of line. What I would do is I would strip the line in, I would form a loop. I would take my first loop on my pinky. I strip a little bit smaller loop, and I put the next loop on my ring finger. So I'm just going up my fingers. I would continue to strip, I would make a little bit smaller loop, and I would go on my middle finger. Finish stripping. Depending on, you know, it's going to vary on exactly how much line you have. You might not need 3 loops, you might need 1 loop, or you might need 2 loops. I don't know, you might need 4 if you shoot a lot of running line. That's pretty rare that you're going to need 4, but so that's really the best way, and it might tangle a little bit because I haven't stretched the line out, but that's the best way. And then you just shoot it off your fingers. So form a loop, grab it with your pinky. A little bit smaller loop, grab it with your ring finger. A little bit smaller loop, grab it with your middle finger. And the reason I'm making a smaller loop is they won't grab the one prior. If I make it bigger than the one prior, you're probably going to grab that other loop. Strip it in. Any questions on that, on how to shoot line, hold it? Practice. A little bit of practice. The other thing I didn't talk about real quick, I know I gotta go, but let me just talk briefly about just thinking about your target and where you want to cast. So let's just say I'm doing a spiral roll. If I'm going to cast that way, I want to cast at an angle, where am I going to get my D-loop? Just like we talked about, I'm going to get my D-loop there to cast there, right? So let me do that better. So I'm going to think there, I'm going to pull my D-loop here to cast there. If I want to cast more straight across the current, again, I'm going to get my D-loop there. And you can see I'm kind of, at the end of my stroke, I kind of push it opposite of where I'm casting. So if I'm going to cast upriver, I'm going to get my D-loop there to cast there. So that's kind of how you want it. You want to think about where you're casting and then align, you know, set your anchor. So if I'm going to cast this way, I'm going to get my anchor a little bit lower. If I'm going to cast this way, my anchor is going to be here. You always stroke on the inside of your anchor. Okay, so real briefly, and then Neil, you're next. And then we'll introduce Neil here, and then. So if I'm going to do a single spey, I want to make sure that I get my anchor high enough to where I can stroke on the inside of it. If I leave that anchor out in front like this, then I'm going to cross my line. My line, as I stroke forward, that line's going to catch my fly line. So always make sure your anchor is upstream of your line of aim and where you're going to stroke. Always stroke on the inside of your anchor. So that's it. Any questions or?
Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you.